New Dawn in the Church is a spirit-filled Catholic family pilgrimage conference.
And welcome to this talk. My name is Christine Ward, and I've been asked to talk to you today about sex and the Catholic Church. So, Catholics, belonging, not believing. As Catholics, we have a shared set of beliefs, and these would include, obviously, God, Jesus, Mary, the Church, the saints, prayer, community life. But when it comes to the sexual teaching, I'm sure we're all aware that many people find this a really difficult stumbling block. So let's just start by looking at what the Church actually says. And this is what most people understand the Church's position to be. So in very simple terms, the Church says that sex outside marriage is a grave sin, that sexual intercourse is for marriage alone, that marriage is a man and a woman, that it must be free from contraception, and that marriage is indissoluble. Now, to show the situation diagrammatically, it would look something like this. So on the one side, we have Catholics who obviously believe in God and Jesus and love, and they're in the Church. They receive the sacraments and attend Mass, and they embrace the social teaching. But when it comes to the sexual teaching of the Church, that seems to be out on a limb. For many Catholics, it's perceived as harsh and outdated. It's not seen as being connected to the will of God or to Jesus, and indeed not even connected to love. So it's often perceived as the teaching of a male church instituted in a man-made fashion and making very little sense today. What this presentation will try and do in a very short space of time is just open your minds to the idea that actually the sexual teaching of the Church comes directly from God himself, and it is totally focused on love, authentic love, and the Trinity, and we have teaching from Jesus. So I would like to show you today in this very brief presentation that the sexual teaching of the Church is not man-made. So where to start? Well, when Jesus was being quizzed by the Pharisees about the situation regarding divorce, he addressed them like this. He said, "Have you not read that the Creator from the beginning made them male and female? And that is why a man leaves his mother and father and becomes attached to his wife, and the two become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. So what God has united, human beings must not divide." So what was this beginning that he was directing the Pharisees back to? They would have known precisely what he meant. When he said the word beginning, he was directing them to go back to Genesis, because there in Genesis, they would discover God's original intention for man, woman, and marriage. So we'll just touch on a few slides concerning Genesis to just show you what Jesus was indicating to the Pharisees. So when we go to Genesis, we find this. God said, "Let us make man in our own image, in the likeness of ourselves, and let them be masters. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them." We notice straight away there that God said, "Let us make man," in the plural, not "let me make man." Why would that be? Well, we all know that God is love. Not just that God is loving, but that God is love itself, that God is love in its pure essence. And what does love need in order to love? It must have a someone to love. So if God is love, as we believe, it makes perfect sense that he's a Trinitarian God, that he is a Father loving his Son, a Son loving his Father, and the Holy Spirit expressive of the love between the two. So let us make man in our own image is an indication of the Trinity and Trinitarian love. And what's the qualities of this authentic Trinitarian love? We use the word love so often today. I love coffee cake, I love Wimbledon, but authentic love is different. Authentic love has qualities attached to it that are from God. Qualities such as it must be forever, otherwise it isn't loving, it ceases to be love. It must be freely given, it can't be forced and coerced. It must be faithful, because infidelity is a crime against loving love. And it must be fruitful, it must be abundant, it must be growing, because as soon as it stops doing that, it starts to wither and ceases to be love. So in Genesis, that phrase, "let us make man in our own image," is absolutely critical, because that tells us who we are created in the image of and what the qualities of that person are. So man and woman are created in the image of authentic love. So let's just drill down a little bit further and look at the creation of man and woman. We find in Genesis, God made all the animals, and these he brought to man to see what he would call them. But no helper suitable for man was found. Now, when we read that and meditate upon it, what we actually understand is happening here is that man is walking around in the midst of all this beauty and creation, all these wonderful animals and creatures. But not a single one of those creatures, beautiful as they are, is the equal of man. Not one of them matches up to him. So man, at that moment in time, comes to understand that he is not bestial. He is not a mere animal. And this is because he is made in the image and the likeness of a relational God. So his purpose, because he's been made in that image, is to be in a relationship. But at this moment in time, in this creation story, he is unable to fulfill his purpose. He's experiencing a lack. He's experiencing solitude. He's on his own, in effect. And then we see when woman is created, how everything changes. Man says, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." So we hear in those two little words sheer delight that finally he now has a someone with whom he can be in relationship with. It's when he's gifted Eve that he understands who he is as a person. It's when he's gifted Eve that his body makes sense to him. It's when she is gifted Adam that her body makes sense to her. And together in their relationship, to be a gift to one another, they can perfectly image the Trinity in eternal, faithful, life-giving love. So she is his helper, she is his divine aid. Woman enables man to discover his vocation and his purpose. And together they complement one another, mind, body, and soul. And in that coming together, they image the Trinity, in whose image they're made. So just in those few brief Genesis slides, we can gather some truths together on the human person. Firstly, that we are made in the image of God. We are not animals. We are not things. We are persons with dignity. That we have an identity, and that identity is authentic love. And that we have a purpose and a vocation, and that is authentic love. And that when we talk about love, we're not talking about just romance and rose-tinted glasses. We're talking about Trinitarian love, completely self-giving, completely self-sacrificing, completely self-donating. So marriage. Marriage was created by God, and Jesus affirms this in Matthew 19, as we saw earlier. Marriage is a deeply personal union between a man and a woman as created by God. And marriage, its purpose is to image the Trinity and enable man and woman to image the Trinity. And marriage is built on the authentic, loving qualities of being forever, free, faithful, and fruitful. And marriage alone is the context that enables that kind of authentic love, because only marriage makes those vows. And the sexual act in marriage affirms the marital vows. So what we say at the altar, that we will give ourselves to the other person in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, until death do us part, The sexual act enfleshes those vows that we state at the altar. And marriage enables us then to be completely self-giving in love. So God's plan. How then does cohabitation, which is so common today, work against God's plan? Well, we need to perhaps compare the foundations of the two relationships, cohabitation versus marriage, and what effects that has on the human person. So we've seen already in Genesis that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and we're called to authentic love. What happens in cohabitation is couples, whether they realize it or not, are often using it as a vehicle to test out the other person for marriage suitability. But we are not called as dignified human beings to test each other out in this manner. We're not going out to buy a second-hand car. We're not trying on a pair of shoes. This is another human person. And so the basis of cohabitation is this basis of a test of the relationship. Whereas in marriage, the foundation is complete acceptance. It's unconditional, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. And then also associated with cohabitation is this notion of self-realization. And by that I mean, couples will ask questions like, will this person make me happy? Will this person meet my needs? Am I compatible with this person sexually? So the questions that are being asked in cohabitation are often very much focused on the me and the I. The focus is individualistic. By contrast, in marriage, the focus is firstly God, then you, and then me. The relationship is centered on God and the sacrament, and the focus of the couple is on God. So the relationship is outward looking rather than just inward looking and individualistic. The whole notion of cohabitation that it is a temporary state of being. It will last either until the couple decide to convert it to marriage or it will simply collapse. But marriage is a permanent state of being until death. And that gives a sense of security to couples that doesn't exist in this temporary relationship of cohabitation. And in cohabitation, we have a contradiction of mind and body. So in cohabitation, couples will be engaging in sexual relations, so giving themselves bodily, but they're not giving themselves completely and totally to the other person. And this is what God is calling us to do, to fully integrate our being, our body, mind, and soul. And marriage enables couples to fully give themselves to one another, for there to be no contradiction in their mind and their actions. Cohabitation then involves a withholding of self. Something is kept back. The person isn't ready to fully give or commit. Marriage says, I'm going to make a total gift of myself to you forever. And that's what God wants for the human person. Cohabitation is a partial relationship then, and marriage is a full relationship. And because cohabitation is a partial relationship, because it involves a withholding of self, because there's a contradiction of mind and body, it's a deficient love. It's lacking. Whereas marriage provides the context for authentic giving and loving. So just to flip it on its head then, let's look at not cohabiting. What happens when couples actually don't cohabit? Virtues. It's a word we don't hear too much about these days, but virtues is a little definition. Virtues dispose us to act for what is good and beautiful. They are qualities, habits, ways of being that enable us to act for what is good and beautiful. Couples that don't cohabit have an opportunity to grow in virtues, and these virtues are of paramount importance when it comes to a successful marriage. So virtues such as fortitude, couples that don't cohabit have to be able to exercise fortitude. They have to be steadfast and resolute. They have to be able to sacrifice what they may really want, i.e. the sexual act, for the benefit of the other and for the benefit of themselves. That means that when it comes to marriage, when they ultimately get married, they already have a preparation in how to prepare and how to face difficulties and how to sacrifice, because they've already been doing it. Temperance is another old-fashioned sounding virtue, but basically temperance is a way of keeping our desires ordered within us and not allowing our desires and our emotions to take over. And this can relate to all sorts of things: sex, alcohol, drugs, bad habits. But the exercise of the virtue of temperance enables us to keep our desires under control. And this helps us to flourish better. So couples that don't cohabit are exercising temperance. And again, this builds strong foundations for marriage, because temperance is a virtue that we all need in marriage. Justice. Justice is to respect God and respect the others around us. Prudence. To discern what is good for our flourishing, to make good choices, to make good decisions. So the more we exercise these virtues, as similarly, the more we go to the gym, the fitter we are, the better our muscle tone. With virtues, the more we exercise them, the stronger we will be when we go into marriage. And this is then borne out in the statistics that those that don't cohabit have a higher marital success rate than those that cohabit first. Contraception. So why does contraception work against God's plan? The nature of the marital act, as we've already said, is a total gift of self, and it enfleshes the vows that we make at the altar when we get married. So the marital act, the sexual act, is not just about a giving of bodies in a sexual act. It's a giving of persons one to the other, totally. Giving yourself, your future, your present, your past to someone else. It's a personal act. And our personhood includes our fertility. You can't separate your fertility from your being. So the conjugal act, the marital act, the sexual act, it creates the one flesh union that enables us to image the Trinity. And more than that, couples share a life-giving power that is unique to them as spouses. And this is hugely important, because we can hug other people, we can kiss other people, we can hold hands with other people. But the sexual act, the marital act, is something that is only for one other person in the entire world. It's an act that says, I give and share with you what I give to no one else on earth. We have a unique spousal power that is our own. And every marital act in marriage, every sexual act within marriage affirms again and again and again that you are the one chosen to share this power with me. So the marital act, the sexual act, has huge significance in its totality. So what does contraception do to the nature and the meaning of the sexual act in marriage? What contraception does is it involves some kind of a withholding, either before, during, or after the sexual act. And in so doing, the total self-giving that the act is intended for, to fully give yourself to another person, is reduced to a partial giving. I'm only going to give a part of myself to you. It overlays the language of giving with another very much contradictory language of not giving, of taking. So it falsifies the nature and the meaning of the sexual act in marriage, and it falsifies its ability to image the Trinity. It impedes full marital union. It impedes that unique spousal power that we've just referred to. And therefore, it reduces the sexual act in marriage to something less than it should be, in the same way that cohabitation reduces the relationship to something less than it should be. And of course, contraception, by its nature, even in its name, contra, is against life. It's a rejection of life. It's against fruitfulness. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Catholics talk about natural family planning, and natural family planning is just another form of contraception. Therefore, it doesn't really matter. The Church is contradicting herself. But that's simply not true. I could have 4 or 5 slides here on contraception versus natural family planning, but I've just pulled a few brief statements together to show a difference between the two. In contracepting, couples are viewing their fertility as a problem that has to be solved. But fertility is a healthy dynamic of the human person, a healthy aspect of the human person, and it should be embraced. Contraception is all about avoiding a pregnancy, whereas natural family planning, by understanding the female cycle, enables couples to avoid and attain pregnancy. Contraception always involves some kind of a barrier to the marital union. Natural family planning involves no such barriers, and therefore the union between the couple is fully maintained. Contraception has side effects. Natural family planning has no side effects. Contraceptors often don't understand their fertility, and often by taking the pill, cycles are masked and misunderstood. In natural family planning, couples develop a complete understanding of that woman's individual fertility. For contracepting couples, communication is not essential, but for natural family planning couples, communication is essential, and that draws couples together. Contraceptors put their trust in condoms and pills. Natural family planning couples are trusting in God and trusting in their spouse. Contraception, as we see in society, enables women to be treated as objects. But in natural family planning, the woman is revered and her body is honoured. For contracepting couples, it's often the responsibility of the individual and usually the woman. But in natural family planning, it's a joint and shared responsibility belonging to the couple. So once again, we see in contraception there is a partial state of being, but in natural family planning there is a total and complete state of being. So, Catholic sexual teaching, a set of outdated rules? No. Sexual teaching has been written into our very being by God Himself. It's there in our being to promote our flourishing, to enable us to live out a life of authentic love, and to enable us to live out a life of Trinitarian love, to be self-giving, self-donating, self-sacrificing. So Catholic morality is not man-made, but it derives from the objective truth of the human person who is made in the image and likeness of God. Thank you. I hope this has given you an opportunity, albeit very brief, to just stop and consider the position of the Church's sexual teaching, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you so much for watching.
New Dawn in the Church is a spirit-filled Catholic family pilgrimage conference